Well, joining me now is Gerry Liston, a senior lawyer at Global Legal Action Network. He represented a group of Portuguese children who were unsuccessful with their climate lawsuit at the ECHR. He is live from Strasbourg for us in France. It's good to have you, sir. The Swiss government said that they have taken note of the ruling and will now analyse and review the measures that Switzerland will take in the future. So let's start there. Does this ruling beholden the Swiss government to take concrete measures? Walk us through what the impact of this ruling is.
Well, I think the most significant impact of this ruling is that it requires much more than the Swiss government to take concrete measures. The ruling has European-wide effect. It requires all 46 member states of the Council of Europe now to revise their targets urgently so that they are science-based and aligned with 1.5 degrees. That's the clear implication of the judge's ruling, which, as you said, has a ripple effect way beyond Switzerland and can even have effects, we hope, beyond Europe as well. And the court today has recognized the intergenerational threat. The intergenerational threat that the climate crisis poses, and also the fact that it is an existential threat. So this is really a landmark ruling from Strasbourg today.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So this was a group of Swiss women. The court ruled that the case brought forward by young people in Portugal, and that was your case, was ruled inadmissible. Here's what one of the claimants had to say after the ruling for the benefit of our viewers.
Court has said the Swiss women's case that governments must cut their emissions more to protect the human rights. So I really think their win is a win for us too, and a win for everyone.
What precedent does this ruling set?
Yeah, so as I said, it's going to all the government lawyers who represented the 32 respondent states in our case are now going to have to advise their governments, the governments they've represented, that they're going to need to look at their targets again and update them, because none of the governments in Europe, in the cases that were before the court today, have targets that are anywhere near aligned with 1.5 degrees. Most governments' targets are aligned to between 3 and 4 degrees within the lifetime of the young people before the court today. So absolutely catastrophic levels of warming. So this precedent will require European-wide revision of climate policies urgently, or otherwise we're going to see, and I think in any case, we're going to see a new wave of climate litigation in Europe sparked at the domestic level, sparked by this ruling from Strasbourg today.
Yeah, This is really interesting because you're pointing out there that, within the lifetime of these youngsters, these targets are completely insufficient. And I think a lot of our viewers will be surprised by the insufficiency of those targets in Europe as they stand at present. In ruling your case inadmissible, the judge said that the climate crisis is existential in a way that sets it apart from other cause and effect cases, but said that the court rejects the applicant's submissions to effect that control over their conventional interests should serve as a relevant test for establishing jurisdiction in the field of climate change. Look, I was even struggling to get through all of that. There's a lot of legalese in there. So for the benefit of me and our viewers, can you break that down for us and tell me how that will impact the way that you approach these types of climate litigation or climate cases in the future?
Sure. Well, the court had never before been confronted with a case that raised an issue of transboundary environmental harm, even, say, pollution crossing a border from one country into another, which is surprising perhaps because the court has dealt with lots of cases concerning environmental issues in recent decades. So this is the first time the court was confronted with this issue. We were hoping it would recognize that states have to reduce their emissions in a way that are sufficient to protect those in the most vulnerable parts of Europe. The court found that states other than Portugal don't owe obligations to those living in Portugal. In other words, don't owe extraterritorial obligations. But ultimately, the fact that the court has emphasized the importance of the 1.5 degree upper limit is, we think, really significant in terms of protecting those that are most vulnerable in Europe. 1.5 degrees is not by any means a safe level. We know that from the impacts that the youth applicants in our case and also the elderly Swiss women in the Klimasienerinen case are experiencing, but it's a significant step forward in terms of decisions that we've seen in domestic courts in Europe so far. And again, I think it's going to spark a new wave of climate litigation at the national level in Europe.
And let's close with that, because we've seen governments across the world appear, or at least say, that they want to address the climate crisis, but we've also seen many ultimately roll back on targets that they had set because industries just aren't up to scale to sustain their economies. How do you see the legal system playing into the climate fight and holding governments to account?
Yeah, well, we've seen exponential growth in the number of climate cases taken in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think that growth is going to continue. Certainly, today's ruling will really, I think, encourage others to pursue further cases and strengthen the hand of those involved in existing cases, both in Europe and beyond. We've also got other cases at the international level. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights and the International Court of Justice are both considering cases at the moment relating to climate change. Ultimately, litigation is just one tool. We're going to need a new wave of, or a bigger wave of climate activism throughout Europe and beyond, again, to enforce the ruling we've got today in the Swiss case. And ultimately, litigation and the kind of activism that takes place on the streets and through advocacy, through the political channels, are mutually reinforcing. And today is hopefully a significant step forward for all working on the fight for a livable future.
It's good to have you, sir. Thank you.